Ya la 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 la. La 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 la. Ya la 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 la. La 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la la. La 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 la. Lie, yeah, lie, 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 yeah, lie, 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 yeah, lie, 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 yeah, lie, 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 lie. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, lie, lie. Shabbat Shalom. Boker Tov. These are not easy days, and as we each find ourselves navigating these tenuous shores of a society still struggling with COVID, people feeling out of sync, isolated, as we come together this morning, we use the experience of Shabbat to root ourselves, to ground ourselves, to come home, even if it is only for a morning, so that we can leave here more oriented, more resilient, more filled with peace. 188. For those who are joining us virtually, please look at the PDF below the live stream link. Open it with a split screen or with a second device, so that you can follow with us throughout the morning. At the bottom of the page, Psalm 121, I turn my eyes to the mountains, reaching for the presence of the divine, weaving the divine help into my breath, my life, and my day. Ehesa einai el heharim, me'ayin yahavo ezri. Ehesa einai el heharim, me'ayin yahavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, ose shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, ose shamayim va'aretz. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. $191. If you have wrapped yourself in a talit this morning, or if you are using the symbolic virtual idea of a talit, whoever wrapped in a talit in one's youth will never forget taking it out of the soft sack, opening the folded talit, spreading it, kissing the borders along its length, sometimes embroidered and sometimes embossed. Afterwards, a great sweep over the head like the heavens, like a chuppah, like a parachute. Afterwards, folding it around one's head, as if playing hide and seek, and then wrapping the body in it tight, tight, letting it fold you like a cocoon, and then opening it like wings for flying. And why are there stripes and not black-white squares like a chessboard? Because squares are finite, without hope. And stripes come from infinity and go on to infinity like the runways at the airport, so that angels may land and take off. When you wrap yourself in a talit, you cannot forget. Coming out of a swimming pool or the sea, and being wrapped in a great towel and casting it over one's head and wrapping in it tight, tight, and shivering a little and laughing and blessing. 192. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Va'ani berov chastecha vovetecha eshachave lecho kodshecha be'yiratecha. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Adonai ahavti me'on beitecha umkom mishkan kevodecha. ואני אשתחווה ואכרעה אברכה לפני אדוני עושי. ואני תפילתי לך אדוני עת רצון אלוהים ברוב חסדך ענני באמת ישך. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו אוהליך יעקב משכנותיך ישראל. 194. Praise to you, Adonai HaShekhinah, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Baruch Ata Adonai, Rofech ol basar, umafli la'asot. 196. Breathe in the gift of nishima, the gift of breathing. And then breathe out your connection to your soul, gifted you by the divine nishama. Elohai nishama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai nishama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi. I offer thanks to you, Adonai HaShekhinah, and Shekhinah of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Baruch atah Adonai, asher biyado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol b'sahar ish. Amen. 198. Miracles abounding, using my prayer space to pay attention, to be mindful, to be connected to these miracles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sechvivina lavchin ben yom uvein laila, for awakening. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrihim, for vision. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurihim, for the ability to stretch. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufihim, for rising to the new day. Page 200. Praise to you, Adonai, our source, sovereign of the universe, who stretches the earth over the waters. Amen. Praise to you, Adonai, our source, sovereign of the universe, who strengthens our steps. Amen. Praise to you, Adonai, our source, sovereign of the universe, who clothes the naked. Amen. Praise to you, Adonai, our source, sovereign of the universe, who gives strength to the weary. Amen. Praise to you, Adonai, our source, sovereign of the universe, who removes sleep from the eyes and slumber from the eyelids. 202. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tselem Elohim, for being in the image of the divine. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani bichorin, for being a free person. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael, for being a Jew. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura, for purpose. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael b'tifaraha, for harmony. Amen. 204, the crowning blessing, which asks us to engage in the privilege and the responsibility, the blessings of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. 209. I find by experience, not by reasoning, but by my own discovery, that the source is near me and I can be near HaShekhinah at all times. I cannot explain it, but I am as sure of my experience as I am of the fact that I live and love. I cannot explain how I have come to live and love, but I know I do, in the same way that I know that I am in contact with HaShekhinah. 213. Hareini mizamenet pi, lehodot ulehalel ulishabeach et bor'i. With this, do I praise and glorify, sanctify my Creator. Baruch atah Adonai melech mehulal batishpachot 215. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Oh, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha Oh, hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. 218. La 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 Hallelujah b'kadsho, Hallelujah b'erkiyahuzo, Hallelujah b'gvurotav, Hallelujah kirov kudlo, Hallelujah b'teka shofar, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 b'teka shofar, hallelujah, b'nevel v'chinor, hallelujah, b'tof u'machol, hallelujah, b'minim v'ugav, hallelujah, b'tziltzalei shama, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 b'tziltzalei shama, hallelujah, b'tziltzalei truah, kol hanshama, tehallel Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 219 Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu v'ruach kol basar tefa'er utromem zichru malkeinu tamid. $220 ilufinu malei shira kayam ulshonenu rina kehamon gilav. $221 al kain aviram shepilagta banu veruach unshama. 222 Ha'el b'ta'atzumot uzecha gadol b'chavod shemecha hagibor lanetzach v'hanora b'norotecha hamelech hayoshev ha'kisei ram v'nisa shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemoho v'chatuv rananu tzadikim b'Adonai la'yisharim nava tehila b'fi yisharim titalah uvdivrei tzadikim titbarach ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש. ובמקהלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו, בכל דור ודור. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ, כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שיר ושפחה, הלל וזמרה, עוז וממשלה, נצח, גדולה וגבורה, תהילה ותפארת, קדושה ומלכות. ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלכי העולמים. 224. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעלמי עולמיה. יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דהמירם בעלמא, ואמרו amen. As you are able, we stand and face Yerushalayim. 226. Ya la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach va'ed. 228, marveling at the universe, at the world that unfolds in front of us. Nature, God's miracle. 228, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, yotzer or uvarei choshech, oseh shalom uvarei et hakol. Hameir la'aretz v'ledarim aleha berachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. תתברך אדוני אלוהינו על שבח מעשה ידיך ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפארוך סלע. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, אור חדש על ציון תאיר, אור חדש על ציון תאיר, אור חדש על ציון תאיר. ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. 230. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai, our source, gracing us with surpassing compassion on account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life. Be gracious to us, teaching us as well, O merciful one. Have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. Te'ha'erenenu b'toratecha, v'dahabek beinu b'mitzvotecha, v'yached levahavenu, le'ahava u'lira et shemecha. V'lo nevosh, v'lo nikalem, v'lo לעולם ועד. יהי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה ישועתך. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו כמו מיעוט לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה ובנו בחרת, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. 232. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le 234. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. 235, we pray responsively. If we can hear the words from Sinai, then love will flow from us, and we shall serve all that is holy with all our intellect and all our passion and all our life. All the children of the source shall eat, and there will be enough. But if we turn from Sinai's words and serve only what is common and profane, making gods of our own comfort or power, our world will grow inhospitable. Let us honor the generations that came before us, keeping the promise for those yet to be. 236. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem ve'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam ve'natnuhu al tzitzit hakanaf betil techelet v'haya lachem letzitzit or item oto uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai va'asitem otam ve'lo taturu acharei levavchem ve'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם Adonai Elohechem Emet. 241. Birkat Geula charges us to act and not to wait till it's convenient, not to wait till it's perfect, but to act, to partner with the divine, to bring about healing, to bring about repair, to do our part, to bring the divine presence to be experienced, honored, felt, and lived here on earth. And what is my lifespan? I'm like a person gone out of Egypt. The Red Sea parts, I cross on dry land. The two walls of water on my right and on my left. Pharaoh's army and his horsemen behind me, before me the desert, perhaps the promised land too. That is my lifespan. 240. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot O Seifele, Nora Tehilot, O Seifele, Shira Chadasha Shibchu Geulim, L'Shimcha Al Sfat Hayam, Yachad Kulam, Hodu V'Himlichu Ve'ameru, Adonai Yimloch, Leolam Va'ed, Tzor Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, Uvtechinu mecha, Yehuda ve'Yisrael. Go Aleinu Adonai, Tzivaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. As you are able, we call one another to a standing position as we prepare for Amidah, the heart of the prayer. Kol hanshama tihalel yah. Let every breath and every soul acknowledge the presence of the divine. Kol haneshama Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Kol haneshama Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Kol haneshama Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Adonai sifatai tiftach Yagi Behilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Yalalai lai lai, 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 yalalai lai lai. La 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 la. 244. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'Imoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot Umevi Gula Livnei V'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah 246 Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai Mechayei Meitim Atah Rav leHoshi'a Mashiv HaRuach Umorid HaGashem Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Mechayei Meitim Berachamim Rabim Sohomech Noflim Verofech Olim Umatir Asurim Kahayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Bal Gevurot Umido Melach Melech Meimit Umechayei Umatzmiach Yeshua V'ne'eman atah lachayot meitihim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei HaMeitihim 248 Nikadesh et Shimcha ba'olam כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ, כבודו. אדיר, אדירנו, אדוני, אדוננו, מה אדיר, שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם. אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. יא לילה 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 לילה, יא לילה לילה לילה, יא לילה לילה לילה. 250. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. מקדשי שביעי שבת, כולם יספעו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וכי הקדשתו שבת. חמדת ימים אותו קראת השבת. זכר למעשה וראשית שבת. זכר למעשה וראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שומרי שבת וקורא עונג שבת. 253. We offer thanks, O source, for this Shabbat, which unites us in faith and hope, for Shabbat holiness, which inspires sacred living, for Shabbat memories glowing even in darkness, for Shabbat peace born of friendship and love. We offer thanks and blessings, O source. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh et HaShabbat, praying privately, belachash, in a whisper, each of us, through page 260, working your way back to your seats when you've completed your prayers. יהיו לרצון. אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי אדוני צורי וגואלי. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. 362. Ein kamocha va'elohim Adonai ve'en kemaasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha bechol dor vador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom av harachamim heitiva v'ertzoncha et Zion tivne chomot Yerushalayim כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך אל רם ונישא, אדון עולמים, as you are able. כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה. Udevar Adonai MiYerushalayim 366 Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Gadlu Adonai iti uneromema Shemo yachtav Lecha Adonai הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח והחול. כי כה בשמיים ובארץ, כי כה בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני הממלכה, והמתנשא לכל לראש. שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד. על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים העולם עומד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים. לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, לא ילמדו עוד מלחמה. A bit of an outfit challenge as I prepare myself to mask up with you. So this morning we are reading from Parashat Bo. And you can find Parashat Bo on page 414, chapter 12, verse 37. We're not beginning in the beginning of the portion, but toward the end. Page 414, chapter 12, verses 37 through 39 for the first Aliyah. And for the first Aliyah, I call Marty Miller all the way from sunny Florida. We ask, Marty, that you stay safe, and we're so grateful that you are praying with us each and every Shabbat. Nala Amod, Mordechai Dov, Zahav, Mi Beit Eliyahu, Yehoshua, Vegela, LeAliyah HaRishonah.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chapanu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayesu bnei Yisrael. Miriam says, Sukkota, Hishes Meot, Elef רגלי הגברים לבד מתאהב, יקם ערב רהב עלה איתם, ורצון ובקר מפני כבד מאוד, ויופו את הבצק אשר הוציאו ממצרים, וגות מצות כי לא חמץ, כי גורשו ממצרים ולא יכלו להתמהמה, וגם צדקה לעשו להם. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. For the second Aliyah, I have the privilege of inviting Dave Rosenthal. Na la amo David mi Beit Shlomo v'Marie la Aliyah harishona hashniah. Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Bakar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'Moshe b'nei Yisrael asher yashvu b'Mitzrayim shaloshim shana v'arba me'ot shana v'yehi miketz shaloshim shana v'arba me'ot shana v'yehi בעצם היום הזה יצאו כל צבאות אדוני בארץ מצרים ליל שימורים הוא לאדוני להוציאם מארץ מצרים הוא הלילה הזה לאדוני שימורים לכל בני ישראל לדורותם.
Beautiful. Leave it right there. Yeah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'hayei olam nata b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Would you do me a favor? Just go over into that corner. That's great. Yesher koach, Dave. I don't know what we would ever do without you. You are such a gift and a blessing in our midst. I pause for a moment to bring our attention to healing. Healing for members of our family, for members of our community, for friends, for this nation. As I pray, I will be holding all of the names that I read last night. As I pray, I am going to turn to you and ask you to add any names that you are holding in your hearts, those who are here today, and of course, the people who are joining us virtually. Please send out those names when I pause. מי שברך אבותינו ואמותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שרה, רבקה רחל ולאה. הוא יברך את החולים. Arnie Isabel, Susan Bosch, Honey Fine, Steve Fine. All of the names that I read last evening, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yimalei Rachamim, Alehem Lachlimam, U'Lerafotam U'Lachzikam. Vayishlach Lahem Meira Refuah, Refuah Shlema, Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh, or Refuat HaGuf. Hashte Bagalav, Izman, Kariv, Ben Omar. Amen. For the third aliyah, I ask Karen Leader to come forward. Nala Amod, Chana mi Beit Binyamin, ve'aliyah le'aliyah hashlishit.
Baruch Hu Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher barcha banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch Ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer Adonai El Moshe v'Haaron Zot Hukat HaPasach Kol Ben Nechar Lo
Yochal bo.
B'chol Eved Ish Miknat Kasaf
Umaltaha
Oto Az Yochol bo. Toshav V'Sakir Lo Yochol bo. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tokenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yesher kochech, yesher koach, and to Marty a yesher koach. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
For Hagba and Glila, I have the privilege of calling Michael Friedman as he joins me on the Biman. Nala Amod, Hagba v'Glila. Nala Amod, please rise. V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Torah, Torah, Torah. Put your hands at the top. Torah, roll it in. Lanu, don't let go, don't let go. Torah, 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 Torah. Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Torah. Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, Torah. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, utvar Adonai Yerushalayim, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, utvar Adonai Yerushalayim. So please be seated. We turn to the Haftarah on page 427. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratzah v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai Habocher batorah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'invi'ei ha'emet v'atzedek. Amen. 427. Hadavar asher deber Adonai El Yirmiyahu Hanavi Lavo Nebuchadrezer Melech Bavel Lahakot et Eretz Mitzrayim Hagidu v'Mitzrayim V'hashmi'u v'migdol, v'hashmi'u v'nof, uv'tachpanches, imru, hityatzeb, v'hakein lach, ki ochla, cherev, svivecha, madua nischaf abirecha, lo amad ki Adonai, Hadafo, hirba koshel, gam nafal. Ish el re'ehu, vayomru, kuma v'nashuva, el amenu, ve'el eretz moladetenu, mipnei cherev hayonah, Karu Sham Paro Melech Mitzrayim Sha'on He'evid Hamoed Chai Ani Neum HaMelech Adonai Tzivaot Shemo Ki Kitabor Beharim Ucharmel Bayam Yavo Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Tzur Kol HaOlamim Tzadik Bechol HaDorot Ha'el HaNe'eman HaOmer Ve'oseh Hamdaber Kayehim Shekol Devarahav Emet Vatzedek Al HaTorah, Ve'al HaAvodah, Ve'al HaNvi'im, Ve'al Yom HaShabbat HaZeh, Shenatata Lahanu Adonai Eloheinu Likdusha V'Limnucha, Lechavod Ultifaret, Al HaKol Adonai Eloheinu, Anachnu Modim Lach Umvarchim Otach, Yitbarach Shimcha, Befi Kol Chai, Tamid le'olam va'ed, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. So I was struck in preparing for this portion by a concept that reminds us that the Torah is not linear. We like to look at the Torah and think A happened, B happened, C happened. But in fact, that's not true. I'm going to share with you a teaching that I love, I marvel at, I don't fully understand. But it's something that really touches me. Before the world was created, Torah existed. Before the creation story, there was Torah. Now hold those two things together. The Torah is not linear, even though we in our humanness want to see it that way. And this mystical teaching that even before creation, the Torah existed. So let's look right where we began, where we were reading today. I'm going to ask you to look at 1217 on page 412. Okay? And here's what we hear. Ushmartem et hamatzot. Ki be'etzem hayom hazeh hotzeti et tzivotechem me'eretz Mitzrayim. Ushmartem al hayom hazeh ledorotechem chukat olam. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an institution for all time. And it goes on to describe matzah, the Passover offering, and the guidance that we have for Passover. And I want you now to use your human chronology, and we'll go from page 412. And I'm going to say to you that, well, let's take the first step, go to 1233. And I'm going to talk about this in a moment. 1233 on page 413. The Egyptians urged the people on, impatient to have them leave the country, for they said, "We shall all be dead." So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. The Israelites had done Moses' bidding and borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. And the Eternal had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request. Thus they stripped the Egyptians. And then we get to where we read, page 414. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 fighting men on foot, aside from non-combatants. Now, what I just left you with on page 414, they've begun, our people have begun, we began our exodus from Egypt. We're traveling from Ramses to Sukkot. And prior to that, we heard that the dough that was rising, we didn't have time to let it rise. And what was the reason? From what we just read, not from what I always say to you. We were in a rush, but why were we in a rush? The text says something different than we say at our Passover tables. It's page 413, 1233. The Egyptians, I can't hear you, P, altogether. The Egyptians were pushing them out. Get out quick. You can't stay here. And why were they pushing them out? Because the 10th plague had just happened, the death of the firstborn, and they say, we are all dying. Kulanu meitim. We're all dying. Imagine all the firstborn dying. The Egyptians want them out. So the Egyptians say to them, go. As P said, they're urging them out. Go. Take whatever you need. And so we hear two things. First of all, they take their supplies, They're matzah because it was dough that didn't have time to rise, right? And in a second we'll go back to this. They are enriched from the Egyptians with gold and silver, all of their riches. But where I began today was before that, on page 412, where I began with the word ushmartem et hamatzot. You shall keep the matzot, or the holiday of matzah. What is incongruous here? You got it, Karen. Well, I read to you that you have matzah even before the advent of matzah. Matzah hadn't happened yet. And yet the Torah is telling us you're going to have the festival of matzah. Let me say it one more time. You look confused, Vicky. So we learned you're going to have matzah. We learned that you're going to have this holiday called Pesach. And we learned the guidelines for it. You're going to eat unleavened bread, matzot, for 7 days. We get that whole thing. And then we find out that the Israelites didn't let their bread rise because they were being urged out by the Egyptians. And then we find out that they start to leave and they're going through the Exodus. The Exodus that I said to you, on this day I will save you, the source says. On this day I will save you. So I just blew out the idea that this story could be in any way chronological. It's not true. Even before the Exodus, even before the advent of matzah, even before the experience happens that they don't have time for their dough to rise, it is already known and understood. Reactions, questions, responses, thoughts. Vicky?
How do we know it was understood by them?
By whom?
By the people of Israel. They might not have known what Hashem was saying, because what was said was, you will have Mozart. What's Mozart? You know, it's like, they might not have known.
Vicky, I love what you're saying. Perfect response. Thank you for that. No, I'm not. I agree with you. I don't think that the Israelites knew. They heard, but we know when we go through an experience. How many of us had to have that experience with our own children or with students? You can describe anything you want, but they only understand fully when they've gone through it. Absolutely. When I say it's known, I'm not saying that the Israelites understood what it meant, and yet the words are there. You're going to have matzot, and maybe that's a beautiful midrash. Matzot, what are matzot? Matzot are unleavened bread. Why would we eat unleavened bread? You're going out to Egypt. So the story is there, but we only understand it when we experience it. So that was a beautiful catch and a beautiful refinement of the message. Both are true. I agree with you. The Israelites didn't understand it. How could they? Pharaoh didn't understand. How could he? The Egyptian people didn't understand. How could they? Until they experienced it. Thank you. Other thoughts, questions, comments, opinions?
Doesn't that sort of happen a lot in the Bible? There's so many compilation of so many different people telling the same story.
Can you just, I didn't hear the first part of what you said. I'm sorry. Could you say it?
Since the Bible sort of, some people think it's a compilation of many different writers, and they stick all the stories together, and they're never all chronological, they get being repeated in different ways.
Absolutely. And yet that's still, in part, one can understand the lack of chronology in that it brings together We say that the Torah is written by the divine and handed down throughout the generations, and history teaches us that there are sources in different times, and they are brought together into this compilation, and that supports the lack of chronology, and yet it's not that alone. A person of faith might say, even if it comes from different ages, it still comes from the divine. And even if that's true, even when there's one voice, J, P, E, even when there's one voice speaking, there is a lack of chronology as it's written, because if all of the Torah was here before creation, then already chronology is off, because right after the Exodus, we're going to receive Torah, right? So we're hearing about something that already, we already know about something that has not yet happened. The actual receiving of Torah itself. I want to take you back.
Can I say,
Sure, Karen.
so they got all the instructions, but and they asked at the top of the page on 413, what do you mean by this rite? And it says, you shall say, it is Passover sacrifice to the eternal, passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt by smiting the Egyptians, but saved our houses. So it gives you all that and then tells you why you're going to do it.
Absolutely. And this,
Even before we have our unleavened bread.
even before the bread is leavened, and yet that's absolutely true, right? And not only that, even before the firstborn are slain, which happens in 12:29. So let's go right there that you brought us there, Karen, and let's take a look at this. Go, if you would, start at 4:11. Uvayom harishon mikra kodesh, uvayom hashvi'i mikra kodesh yeh lachem, kol melacha lo yaseh behem. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day and a sacred occasion on the seventh day. No work at all shall be done on them. Only every person is to eat. That's Passover. I didn't mean to go back a whole thing. So go to 412. Page 412, chapter 12, verse 24. You shall observe this as an institution for all time, for you and for your descendants. We're speaking about Passover. You ever wonder why Passover is such a formidable holiday for our people? Here it is in the very beginning of the formation of our identity. The very first holiday we're given is Passover. And here's the point that Karen picked up. This sentence, chapter 12, verse 25, is actually 26, is actually in the Haggadah itself. And when you enter the land and the Eternal will give you as promised, you shall observe this rite. And now look at 26. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? What is this rite to you? That's how the Hebrew reads. What is this observance to you? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Eternal, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when smiting the Egyptians, but saved our houses. So Karen, your point, not only is this told even before that happens? So again, we know about the story and then it will unfold, but actually we know something else. We know that our children are going to say, what does all this mean? Why is this so important to you? This doesn't have the same meaning to me. That's even anticipated in the text. And the answer is given. You shall say to them, this is what happened to us. This is what happened to our houses. Not to our ancestors' houses, but this incredible link that happens here. the immediacy, the primacy of the experience. So again, from the points that you guys are bringing forth, two things are happening. The first is stuff is being said that hasn't even occurred. The second is we are led to understand that the experience of repeating over and over and over again how one births their sense of identity will have to happen every Passover, every generation, every Shabbat. That in fact, as we get farther and farther from being slaves, it's easier and easier to remember that it's harder and harder to remember that freedom is something to be treasured. If you've been listening to the news, you hear that a lot of people are beginning to question whether democracy is going to be sustained here. And for most of us, and for most people who were born in America, we actually never thought that this was a question. It wasn't a question we pondered. We thought that democracy was here to stay. It was the very foundation of who we were, and it was a given. But we're learning that it's actually quite fragile. We're learning that it's not necessarily so. And this is bringing up for us a new way to hopefully cherish the democracy. In our text, each and every Passover, each and every generation, you taste the matzah. You mark your homes with the mezuzah. You tell your story so that your children and their children experience it as if it is their story. Expect that the next generation will say, "What is this to you?" This is already anticipated. Any other comments here before I take you to another part? I'm going to ask you to go to chapter 10, verse 9. Page 406. I'm going to start at 10, verse 7. Pharaoh's courtiers said to him, "How long shall this one be snare to us? Let a delegation go to worship the eternal their God. Are you not yet aware that Egypt is lost?" So what we have, as I go backward in today's teaching, is with each plague, the Egyptians see and experience the hardship. With each plague, they are almost convinced to succumb to the presence of the divine. So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go worship the eternal your God, who are the ones," and he says to them, "Who are the ones to go?" Moses replied, "We will all go, regardless of our social station. We will go with our sons and our daughters, our flocks and our herd, for we must observe the Eternal's festival." And Pharaoh answers, but he said to them, "The Eternal be with you, the same as I mean to let your dependents go be with you, the same as I mean to let your dependents go with you. Clearly you are bent on mischief. No, you gentlemen go and worship the Eternal, since that is what you want." And they were expelled from Pharaoh's presence. What just happened there? Let's just restate it in our words. I find the English more confusing than the Hebrew, I have to be honest with you. What just happened? The Egyptians are having a difficult time. right? The locusts are upon them. They're having a difficult time, and they want the Israelites to go. Go on, go worship. So they bring Aaron and Moses to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh actually engages in a dialogue with them. And in the dialogue, Pharaoh actually asks them, who are the ones to go? Who's going to go? And how do Moses and Aaron, or in this case Moses, reply? Who's going to go to worship the divine? They'll all go. Now this is significant, Evie, because it says something to us. The way it's so definitive. Moses says, it doesn't matter what your station in life is, if you're the most revered or the simplest. It doesn't matter if you're a son or a daughter. Even our flocks and our herds will go with us. We all will observe the festival of the source. This is actually an exquisite, it's one of the few handful of times that the Torah text makes it clear that observance as a Jew is not relegated to any one group. Not to learned, not to men, not to adults, not to abled or differently abled, but to everyone. And it's made very clear. That's the pshat. Now, later in the text, the Hebrew is ki ra'ah neged pneichem. Ki ra'ah neged pneichem. Pharaoh says, I see the ra'ah, I see the evil intent in your face. And your text says the mischief in your face. What is Pharaoh referring to? I see the mischief, the evil intent in your face. Vicky?
I don't know, it's a guess. Maybe that the Egyptians, that there's civil war, and there go the Egyptian soldiers.
We haven't even come to that yet. What has Moses and Aaron asked for from Pharaoh?
Great deal of wealth over slaves.
Not yet, not that either. Did they ask to be released? Actually, here in this section, up until now they've been saying, let my people go, let my people go. But this right here, let us go observe the festival of the divine. They're not asking to be released from slavery. We have to go and celebrate our holiday. What holiday? What holiday? No, Karen. I'm not going to repeat that because that's you didn't mean to say that, did you?
No.
I think you meant to say Passover, right?
Yes.
But the rabbis don't agree with you. But that's a good guess. The other one you said before wasn't a good guess. That Passover, maybe, but the rabbis don't think so. Not Shabbat. Some people want to say Rosh Chodesh, and we get to this from the whole thing in 12:1, where we hear of the first year of the month of Nisan, but this is before that. Rav Bachya says this is referring to Shavuot. That's actually one of the reasons they want to bring the flocks and the herds. Shavuot, they want to bring their bikurim, their choicest fruits. Let us go celebrate Shavuot. Here is yet another example of what I opened with. Shavuot, what does Shavuot celebrate, guys? Yes.
What?
Receiving of Torah. So we know that this doesn't happen until after the Exodus, and yet they seem to be asking to go celebrate Shavuot, which is actually not chronologically correct. But yet that seems to be, perhaps it's Rosh Chodesh, that's what the rabbis say. Perhaps it's Shavuot. Perhaps, Karen, they're anticipating Passover even before we get the laws of Passover, again, without the chronology supporting it. But in the end, Pharaoh does not let them go. Correct? Pharaoh doesn't let them go. And what is this passage? Vaygarshu, vayigaresh otam me'et pnei paro. And they were expelled from Pharaoh's presence. Who was expelled? I think that I agree with you. Moses and Aaron, and they were expelled, right? There is a really interesting take on this. They were expelled is what I would understand. Ki ra'ah neged penechem. Ki ra'ah neged penechem. The rabbis teach that Ra'ah was the name of a star in Egyptian history, and that Ki ra'ah neged penechem, the star was out in front of them. And that was the reason that Pharaoh was like, go, you've got the star, you can go travel. But we know that they don't travel. Ki ra'ah neged penechem. And the evil intent was in front of their faces. The evil intent, perhaps the sin of the golden calf, which hasn't even happened. But as you know, they're collecting on their way out the gold and silver. What are they going to do with that gold and silver? Ki ra'ah neged penechem. I want to show you one more thing before we go to close the study today. Go to chapter 10, verse 19. Chapter 10, verse 19. You can find it on page 407. Vayahafoch Adonai Ruach Yam Chazak Ma'od. The Eternal caused a shift to a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and hurled them into the sea of reeds. Not a single locust remained in the territory of Egypt. Okay. The locusts were inflicted on the Egyptians. And then the source lifts all the locusts. Okay? So now there's not one locust left on anybody. And I want to share with you that the locusts were the 8th plague. Of course, darkness is the 9th, and the death of the firstborn is the 10th. And then right after all of the locusts are lifted, in 20 we hear, Vayachazek Adonai et lev paro. But the Eternal stiffened Pharaoh's heart. And he, Pharaoh, would not let the Israelites go. I wanted to take a moment here, because I know it's going to disturb Evie and maybe others of you. Wait a minute. The 8th plague, locusts. And all of the locusts are lifted. There's not one locust annoying anybody or endangering anyone. And the next word, Vayachazek Adonai et lev paro. And the Eternal stiffened Pharaoh's heart. So what are the questions or the pushback or the thoughts that you have? Evie?
Never understood that. Because God is making Israel to have to live with the plagues also. Why didn't he just let, okay, Pharaoh, that plague was enough. Why did he need 10 plagues?
I've never understood that, says Evie. Why would the source harden Pharaoh's heart here? That's Evie's question. And it's a perfect question, and you know, Evie, we started to look at it last week, and I reminded you that in the first 5 plagues, it's Pharaoh who hardens his own heart. And then in the 6th plague, the source hardens Pharaoh's heart. And then in the 7th plague, Pharaoh hardens his own heart again. In the 8th and the 9th and the 10th, it is the source that hardens Pharaoh's heart. And Evie, rightly so, asks, what kind of divinity hardens someone's heart? Now we can say what I said last week, which is, if I walk around every single day choosing to be bitter, I choose to be bitter, I choose to be bitter, I choose to be bitter every day for a week, every week for a month, every month for a year, every year for a decade. At the end of a certain period of time, when you come to see me and I respond to you, all you are going to know from me is bitterness. Now, if I've turned my heart bitter day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, that I turn my heart bitter, at some point I have gone to a point of no return. I am bitter. Now, you could say, when you meet me 10 years down the road and you come and you say, hi, Rabbi Yael, and I have something horrible to say to you, Evie, and you can say, why has the divine made you so bitter? And it would be a fair question. But I could also answer you and say, I made myself bitter. Every day I had 2 notes in 2 pockets, each with a note. One said, I'm surrounded by hardships. The other said, look at all of these miracles. And all I could see was the hardships, right? That each and every day for that period of time, it was all miserable for me, that I made myself miserable. But still, Evie's going to push back, and Evie's going to say, fine, Rabbi, I've heard you say that. I've heard you say that last week. I heard you say that last year. I still want to know what kind of divinity removes the locusts and then hardens the heart of Pharaoh. And I had an epiphany this week. When the judge sentenced the 3 white men in Georgia and who had killed Ahmed Arbery. And before he sentenced them, he had to decide, would they have life with the possibility of parole or life without parole. And he took it really seriously. It was actually quite moving to hear him speak. And as he was speaking, he asked everyone in the courtroom to honor one moment of silence so that they could experience a fraction of the 5 minutes that these 3 men hunted down this 25-year-old young man. A fraction of what he experienced for 5 minutes, because in the trial, they actually described a struggle, and it was a split moment, and a person had been good all of their life, and in a split moment of passion, they shot him. And the judge asked for us to honor 1 minute of silence, which was just a fraction of the 5 minutes. And I was driving in the car and there was silence for 1 minute. Now I want you to go back to the text. And I want you to hear it this way, Evie. I want you to take another teaching that I've taught you. It's not enough to read the words that are written, but read in between the words, in between the letters, the white fire. And listen to this. Not a single locust remained in the territory of Egypt. There's space before the next word. Here's my question to you, Evie. 8 times, the source of creation took back the plague that had been put on it and asked for Pharaoh to do something. Change your ways. Allow my people to go free. And as you look at it, Evie, what you hear is, not a single locust remained in the territory of Egypt, but the Eternal stiffened Pharaoh's heart. And what I hear is, not a single locust remained in all of the territory of Egypt. Silence. Here's your chance, Pharaoh. You write the story. You show a change of heart. You show that your heart's not hardened. But nothing happens. And then Pharaoh hardens the heart. What am I saying? It's not enough to just read that that's the next word. Read the space in between when nothing changes. Because if we just keep going down the same path with nothing changing, then we're writing our own stories. Pharaoh wrote his story 5 times in his lack of in his hardening his own heart. And then 1 time the source hardens his heart and then gives him another chance. But yet again, Pharaoh hardens his heart. And then Pharaoh hardens his own heart. And then the locusts come and the source removes all the locusts. And this was the opportunity. Now, Pharaoh, in this moment of pregnant pause, you have the opportunity. And what is there? Nothing but space. And only then, when there was no change, as I read it, did God go ahead and harden Pharaoh's heart. And then comes the end, the darkness and the killing of the firstborn. I refuse to see a God that manages me like a pawn piece. I believe in the presence of the divine everywhere and at all times. And I believe that I have agency, as Pharaoh did, as each of us do, for how I want to act. And when I act or when I don't act, that is part of my agency. Does it satisfy, Evie? Does it offer some food for thought? Is it perfect? It's a struggle that needs to be lived and relived. Last words from you guys. Vicki?
Yeah, I'm thinking when you were saying that, this whole idea of time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when he didn't make a decision, Pharaoh, to free the Hebrews, then God started
The process. Very much the point that I was hoping to try and make.
so that the next plane was started, and actually, the source did harden the heart by doing another plane. You know what I mean? But the plane itself
Or the plague gave yet another opportunity for changing. So, I mean, that's the way, yes and no. At each and every moment, I'm given that opportunity. What do I do with it? How do I respond to it?
See, I don't get it. I still don't get it because I don't think it was. I can't believe also that the source said, actually said, well, now I'm going to harden your heart.
I took the locusts away and now I'm going to harden your heart. And that's exactly my point. I took the locusts away, now do something.
Yeah.
Now act. And there was no action. Yeah, Dave?
I noticed that the next verse, 21, is immediate, like Hashem is immediately responding to Pharaoh's lack of change. In other words, before, Hashem is asking Moses, or Moses is going to go to Pharaoh and say something. Now it's just saying, hold up your arm, there will be darkness. It's like immediate. It's almost like verse 20 and 21.
That the source said there was nothing left to discuss.
Right.
Na lakum, please rise. Yahalalu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren le'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael, am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם תורתי, אל תעזובו. עץ חיים היא, למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר. דרכיה, דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם. So, I want to take a moment and just remind everybody that there is a religious school experience tomorrow at 9:30. And it will be in person and outdoors to keep everyone safe. Following that Tu B'Shvat religious school experience, there will be an age group classes from 11 to 12, and for the pre-KK 11 to 11:30 virtually. Indoor classes for our Zimit education experience will resume on January 23rd in the building. Next week, all of my classes are as scheduled. I look forward to seeing you. Brotherhood's monthly meeting is Tuesday evening at 6:30. New members are welcome to join. Coming up on Saturday, January 22nd, we will be, as a congregation, celebrating Tu B'Shvat, gathering outdoors in Rhinebeck at 4 p.m. Everybody who is planning on participating, we ask that you make a reservation so that we have a contact tracing list of emails and so that you can receive the address for where we will be gathering. You should be able to make your reservations online or by calling the main office. We encourage everyone to continue to be part of helping to feed our neighbors who do not have equal access to food and food security. Please take one of the brown paper bags as you're leaving today and make it part of your weekly shopping, or look online and find, if you would, the guidelines for how you can get more involved. If our live stream services are meaningful to you, if you are using our community to feel connected during such a challenging time, if you love coming to services and are doing so via live stream, please consider making a donation to our congregation. It's easy by going to our website and to our giving page. We are so privileged to be here for you. We ask that you honor that privilege by helping to sustain our community. It is with sorrow in our hearts that we are with David Hirsch on the very immediate, yesterday or last evening, loss of his brother Michael Hirsch. Zichrono livracha, may his memory be for a blessing. Together, as a community, we are so grateful that we are able to be here for you this morning, and we are so sorry for your loss. So too are we with all of our members of our community who sustained losses this past month. We are with Lisette Landon as she remembers Harold Morrison, with Carmel Gold as she remembers Richard Vidulich. And we are with all the members of our congregation who are in their year of Shana, their year of grieving after the loss of a loved one. Tonight, this morning, we also honor the yahrzeits of loved ones who died in this season in years past: Lillian Aaron, Samuel Bloom, Dave Fromson, Ken Fromson's father, Julius Honig, Harriet Katatsky, Eli Bosch's cousin, Benjamin Kopp, Samuel Levitas, Lorraine Mallon, David Mallon's mother, Joseph Mautner, Marilyn Ronder, Rose Schemp, Saul Schwartz, Melanie Hill's father, Samuel Seidlan, Arthur Shapiro, Elizabeth Carlotti's grandfather, Iris Singer, William Spiegel, Augusta Stern, Mary Trott, Mark Trott's mother, Alvin Werbolowski, Jay Werbolowski's father, Pauline Wexler, Jennifer Gutterman's grandmother. For all of those who have been mentioned, for the martyrs of our people who left no one to say Kaddish for them, for the people of every race and nation who live their lives as a blessing to humanity, we are with you, and as you are able, we stand together. 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach le'olam ulalmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei t'kudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiram b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol b'nei Adam. V'imru. Amen. Page 628. Yigdal Elohim, Chai v'yishtabach, Nimtza ve'ein et el mitziuto, Echad ve'ein yachid, Keyichudo, Nelam v'gam ein sof le'achduto, Ein lo demut haguf, ve'eino guf, Lo na'aroch elav, Kiddushato, Kadmon lechol davar, Asher nivra, Rishon ve'en reshit lereshito. Hine Adon Olam, Lechol notzar, Yoreh gedulato, Umalchuto, Shefa nevuato, Nitano el, Anshe segulato v'tif arto, Lo kam b'Yisrael, Kim Moshe od, Navi umabit, Et munato, Torat emet natan, Le'amo el, Al yad nevi'o neman beito. Lo yachalif ha'el, Ve'lo yamir to'ato, Le'olamim, Le'zulato, Tofev yodea, Sitarenu, Mabit l'sof davar bekad moto. Gomel le'ish chesed, Kimif ahalo, Noten l'resha kerishato, Yishlach l'ket yamin, Bidut olam, Kol chai v'yesh yakir Yeshu ato. Chaye olam nata, B'tochenu, Baruch adei ad, Shem tehilato, Yalai la 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 la, Yala la 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 la, La 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 la, La Vishamru, B'nei Yisrael, Et HaShabbat, Lasot et HaShabbat, Ledorotam berit olam. Beini ubein b'nei Yisrael, Oti le'olam, Oti le'olam, V'shamru b'nei Yisrael, Et HaShabbat, Lasot et HaShabbat, Ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz, uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash, ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, Lasot et HaShabbat, Ledorotam berit olam. Savri, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei peri hagafen l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. This is for you to take home for Shabbat. We're with you.
We're so sorry to hear about your brother.
Thank you.
It's a big loss. It's real tough.